obvious, but not much has been written on the subject. So, it seemed to be a strange way of saying something, but although the character of Sauron would probably have been in existence for some time in Tolkien's mind, the character we have come to know and love, of course, as Sauron, aka the Necromancer, aka Thu, was officially born on paper between March the 30th and March the 31st, 1928, as Christopher Tolkien intimates in The Lays of Beleriand in his introduction to the Leolithian, page 151. He starts to appearing on verse 2041, which describes Transylvanian. This is the black and white drawing that I'm using, not the colored version by H.E. Riddett. This one was drawn in August, in the summer 1928 in Faile. So he was illustrating what he had actually been writing about in the Leolithian. An elven tower it had been, and strong it was, and still was fair, but now did grim with menace stare, one way to pale Beleriand, the other to that mournful land beyond the valley's northern mouth. Thence could be glimpsed the fields of Bridoux, the dusty dunes, the desert dunes, the dusty dunes, a desert wide, and from afar could be descried a brooding cloud that hangs and lowers on Thangorodrim's thunderous towers. Now in that hill was the abode of one most evil, and a road that from Beleriand thither came, he watched with sleepless eyes to pool of flame. From the north there led no other way save east, where the gorge of Aglon lay, and that dark part of hurrying dread, which only needy orcs would tread, through daily nightshades awful gloom, where Tarnaf winds branches loom. And Aglon led to Doriath, and Fëanor songs watched over that path. Men called him Thu, and as a god, in after days, beneath his rod bewildered, bowed to him, and made his ghastly temples in the shade. Not yet by men enthralled adored, now was he Morgoth's mightiest lord, master of wolves whose shivering howl forever echoed in the hills, and foul enchantments and dark zigguldry did weave and wield. In Glamory that necromancer held his host of phantoms and of wandering ghosts, of misbegotten or spell-wrong monsters that about him thronged, working his bidding dark and vile, the werewolves of the wizard's isle. So notice that at that time he still has two eyes of flame. We already had intimations of what he would become, a master of men, a maker of temples, worshipped by the men he enthralls, either literally or figuratively speaking, because enthralling can mean several things, and they're both right and correct as far as he's concerned. And later we know that he escapes and turns into a vampire to escape the crushing jaws of the wolfhound Huan. In the Lays of Beleriand, he actually leaves his body there. A vampire shape with pinions vast, screeching, leaped from the ground and passed his dark blood dripping on the trees. And Huan, neath him, lifeless, sees a wolfish corpse, for Thu had flown to Tarnafwin, the new throne and darkest stronghold there to build. His original name was Thu. In the etymologies in volume 5, we learn that the root Thu comes from saure, which means putrid, putrefaction, corruption. So Sauron is the archetypal corrupter. And here we come back to the theme of the weekend, which is about seduction and corruption, which several other people have alluded to, which creates a really strong theme for the whole weekend. So I'm really glad that's the sort of the spirit of the time we're quite well assumed together. He's also known as Morthu, the black corrupter, or Gorthu, which could mean two things, because if you cut it as Gorthu means the dread corrupter, and Gorth means white and phantom. If you add it to Thu, it's the white corrupter, the corrupter of ghosts. The opposite, of course, of corruption is preservation. So if you think that it may have been his original function before he fell and before he was tempted. As a fallen agent, being the agent of corruption and corruption would make him the equivalent of Beelzebub, the lord of flies. Because where do flies gather? In The Hobbit, the main facet of him we're presented with is that of the necromancer, diviner from the dead, or controller of the dead. In The Lord of the Rings, his facet of corrupter comes to the fore, and the rings are his chief tools for doing so. Note how the rings, and somebody had talked about the powers of the rings, particularly the elven rings, are initially agents of preservation. So again we have the duality, preserving, corrupting. Other rings which were touched by Sauron perverted their possessors and became agents of corruption instead. As Annatar, Sauron will use his duality of preserver-corrupter to tempt the elven smiths of Eregion who wish to preserve life in Middle-earth, and then he Númenóreans who will become Ulairi. And the word Ulairi is a very interesting word. I wrote a paper on the subject in 1987 called Ulairi, a linguistical philosophical reflection, and which was published in the local magazine of the Smile, Weather Top 5. So I'm not going to read the whole text here, it's one page, but in the length of the program I probably. So I've done 30 copies of it, so it's first come, first served for those who want it. What was interesting is that the meaning, in actual fact, does Ulairi means unalive. So the ring wraiths are not undead, but they're unalive. And that's quite interesting in itself. That's a variation on the theme. And of course, the person who will be tempted will be Pharazôn, and that will enable him to corrupt the whole Númenórean culture. Beware of people bearing gifts for no reason as they come with strings attached. That's a sort of a paraphrasing Virgil here. Sauron's chief lever is man's fear of death. Death is a gift of Eru to man, the ability of seeking that else wither. Morgoth changes man's notion of death from a gift to a curse. Seeing elves not dying, they think that not dying is the only men think that not dying is the only thing that distinguishes men from elves. And that instead of receiving an additional gift, immortal life has been taken away from them. So they naturally or unnaturally wish to prolong their life to become elf-like again. And Sauron gives them apparently what they want, but it isn't that, because the ring cheats, somebody else said that before, and never give what people think it will give them. So it does not give immortality, it's the same span of life you normally have that just gets stretched. So this is a corruption. The whole concept of preserving life and preventing men to die is a corruption of the utmost degree, because it's a corruption of Eru's plan. It prevents men to see the elsewhither which awaits them. The ring apparently preserve, but they are in fact corrupt. Even dwarves are corrupted. Although they are children of Aule, who gives away what he makes, it makes them greedy hoarders who succumb to the gold sickness. So, who are the inspirations for Sauron? In Lost Tales we have three. Two, the Black Magician. I'm not going to expand on the roles and functions and properties, but you can see go back to Lost Tales. They appear in Gilfanon's tale, this one. Then you have Fangkil, Fukil, who is a servant or son of Melkor, and Tevildo, the Prince of Cats. But there's also another inspiration. And what is this? What could be this other inspiration? And that's the inspiration that I suggest here is Dracula. And it appears there are many elements and similarities which link the character of Dracula, which was published in 1897. And not just in his version as Dracula, which is that white mustachioed person here. No connection with mine. I hasten to say, just in case. But much more closer at hand was Nosferatu. which was released in 1922. And it's a cribbing from Dracula, so it's, well, despite the fact that it's got a different name, it's basically Dracula's story. It's just that the Murnau didn't get the film rights from Bram Stoker's estate. And there's some very interesting aspects about that. I'm inviting you to look at that. Sauron is much more than that. The information we have of him in the lake corresponds to Dracula and Nosferatu. Gwyneth Hood, who is somebody that I don't know. When I did a search on wanting to write a paper on Sauron and Dracula, I asked Verlin Flieger, she said, nobody's ever done something on the subject, and asked Jessica, and bless Jessica. Where's Jessica? Yeah. There you are. Jessica said, yes, in Mythlore, Winter 87, there's an article by a certain Gwyneth Hood, Sauron and Dracula. And she gave me the paper. I scanned it and reprinted it, and I have 10 spare copies going on that subject. And she explores the subject of the character of Dracula and the similarities between Dracula and Sauron, specifically in the book Dracula. But she doesn't seem to have actually read The Lord of the Rings. There's no references to that. But it's very good. So, first come, first served. So she made no references to the Silmarillion. Only Pat Wynne, who illustrated that, did found a link between Sauron and Dracula, as he would, of course. A key feature of Dracula, which may have enabled the connection to express itself. So let's see the similarities. I'm sort of mismatched. There's a bit of mismatch between my paper and the presentation. What are the similarities between Dracula and Sauron? Associated with wolves, controlling wolves. They're great similarities at this end. And even the name werewolf in Elvish is Gaud, which is a metathesis of warg. That shape. In the case of Sauron, he has a particular minion who is also that shape, Thuringwithil, who gets killed, and the shape, and Luthien takes the shape of Thuringwithil to go and seduce herself Morgoth in order to recover Silmaril. They need to be invited in the dwelling. And Sauron does that repeatedly. He needs to be invited in Ostinedil. In order to be invited, of course, what do you do? What did the Greeks do to be invited into Troy? They bring gifts. Who can refuse somebody who gives you a gift? You get a freebie, you're more likely to buy. That's the archetype of corruption. So, and you get free software and free programs, and now they own you and all the information about you. Yes. So they can only be killed in their fortresses or their seat of power. Their death brings about the death of their minions. Dracula feeds on the blood of his victims. We don't have any evidence that Sauron does the same, but maybe the Rings of Power is a way of draining the life essence of the wearers, so that it adds to the power of Sauron. Maybe we don't know that, but it's a hypothesis. So some very interesting. A key Dracula, which may have enabled the connection, was expressed to good effect in Nosferatu, the hands of the character, which were particularly claw-like. Tolkien seemed to have found hands, and especially nails, quite disturbing. This is Matt Doe, which was a drawing which was also done in 1928, the same year, to illustrate a dream of his son Michael. And he seemed to have shared similar sort of nightmares, because this is a drawing from 1913 called Wickedness. So notice that hand and the claw-like aspect of it. And you find it in the first sketch of the map in The Hobbit, which is Fimbulfambi's map. Now this map is not like the map you see in the later version. Look at that. It's a hand with long claws, long claw-like nails, and it's hairy. So it evokes the concept of a werewolf and echoes of Nosferatu. And so Tolkien had some ideas that the necromancer was behind the whole story in The Hobbit in some way, in the earliest version, because he knew that he had escaped. So, Macdo. And incidentally, it also reappears with that particular hand in the Barrow White. And we had a quote this morning. Was it this morning? Oh, yes, last night in the Tailoring Circle, there was a reading of that selection which brought it to mind, and I completely forgot. And of course, afterwards, the hand walks by itself, like a spider. So it's a sort of spiders and hands that have a sort of similar element of creepiness. And told me I've had a phobia about those. So, Tolkien, you're here in 1928, and Tolkien has found that Dracula is a good source of inspiration. And now he's going to go the other way around. There's some interesting interplay between what goes on in his mind and how he finds... So he's going to seek to find information in the real world about Dracula and the world of Dracula. And there's one, and he probably would have started doing searches in that respect. And this is Castle Bran, which is supposed to be one of the castles in Dracula. But I looked at that, it didn't seem to correspond. Notice he has an interest in the towers. You find, if you remember, the tower in Transylvanian had very pointy roofs. But it doesn't seem to match the Tolkien drawing. And that's another one. This is a tower at Thun, near Interlaken, with sort of a... And so he would have drawn it. He may have drawn inspiration. He would have looked at that. And this is the drawing of Bridoux, of course, which you all know. But how closely have you looked at that drawing? There's so much information, and we only see a small bit of information, a small aspect of it. But there's a whole sides of it we don't know. I'm inviting you to look more particularly at the bridge and at that side here. Since last year, I've been searching for an architect who would do me a rendering of that side, because I wanted to see what it would look like. And strangely enough, in Romania, there's a castle that is also strongly associated with Sauron, which is Castle Hunedoara, which is also known as Corvin Castle. And I looked on the internet, and this is the bridge. Sorry, sort of. And look at that particular bridge. These are the ruins. The bridge, the structure of the bridge is remarkably similar to that one. You find the parapet, the sort of arches. And something else, of course, this particular, notice the sort of the towers and the sort of curvy steeples, pointing curvy, and that incredibly long steeple. And there is one building, and castle. And this is Castle Hunedoara, Corvin Castle in Romania. And notice the height of that particular tower. It's one of the buildings associated with Dracula. And people have used that connection and that association across the years. So I'm not saying Tolkien cribbed that, but for something... for a drawing as graphic and as precise, architecturally speaking, as Bridoux, it may have been an inspiration. So, similarities, Corvinus Castle, Bridoux. But there's more than that, because it goes into the mapping effect. And there's some strange interplays happen at this end. John Radcliffe said in 1987 when he presented a paper on The Hobbit at the second Tolkien workshop at Church House, that in order to expand his maps, Tolkien basically sort of flipped them round. Of course, we are all familiar in this day and age with maps in fantasy books. And you think, oh, flipping a map round, how simple, how simplistic. But very few authors had used maps before Tolkien, and certainly never to that extent. So Tolkien would have used that. So the map of the Silmarillion would have actually allowed to an expansion of the map of Middle-earth. And if you compare at this end, you have Hithlum, and what you have in the map of Middle-earth at that end, you have Mordor. And there are further similarities between that. In this map, what is the name of the tower on Tol Sirion? Who knows? Minas Tirith, exactly. And Minas Tirith, and the mountains next to this, so you have two Minas Tiriths, one Minas Tirith here, and one Minas Tirith there. These mountains here are called Ered Weddrin. What does that mean in Elvish?
Weather.
No, the mountains of shadow. And what's the name of these mountains in The Lord of the Rings? The mountains of shadow, Yefel Duath. And they're another name for mountains of shadow. So it's the same, it's just changed the name and used a slightly different definition with Eiffel for expel for fencing, because they're very, very steep. And Tolkien expanded his map that way. I'm planning another paper. It's like papers are coming fast at this moment in time in my mind. It's terrible. Faster than I can sort of work on them. And on cartography, and very little has been done on Tolkien and cartography. There is not even an article in Christina and Wayne's momentous mammoth duology on cartography and maps. I haven't got Michael Drout's encyclopedia, so I don't know what there is in there. But I don't think there's very much, so you can do that. And basically, and there's a further connection which I need to look at there, because it goes the other way around now. Look at the map of Hithlum. And this is Romania. So it goes the other way. And it informs the person. So when Tolkien would draw Mordor, look at the structure. You have a similar structure, especially the location, and of course that dent in here, the plain, which is over there. So it would feed back information. There would be a toing and froing between the myth and the geography and the topography, which would allow him to flesh out his mythology and enrich it further. And these are the two locations of Castle Corvin and Castle Bran. Notice here how Corvin is crow, and Bran in Welsh means what? Raven. So Tolkien may have found that interesting as well, because that's the linguistic person would have been interested by that. So maybe further similarities between Dracula and Sauron. Notice the name is purely fortuitous, but it's interesting. Romania, Romain means east. The shape of the mountains, the location, the respective location. And I will leave it at that, because that's all the time I have.
It just struck me while you were talking that certainly in Bram Stoker's Dracula, Van Helsing's research suggests that this Dracula that they're dealing with is one who's actually at school under Satan himself and became Satan's most beloved pupil.
Yeah.
And that sort of reflects Morgoth and Sauron relationship.
Interesting. I have not. I bought Dracula. I haven't read it for years, and it's not something which Gwyneth would put in her paper.
It's like one line.
But it's worth exploring further. So I'm just charting things out and mapping things out, and if people want to expand on that, feel free.
So, I'm sure this is really quite a question or a comment, but somewhere between. But to what extent Tolkien's interest might have been drawn to that part of the world, to Romania, not just through Dracula, but through the older legends of the gods and things like that that were associated there. Particularly the Carpathians. If you look in Haedrek's saga that Christopher Tolkien edited, he'll have a note in the introduction that the Carpathians are referenced in that saga, but under the Germanic form of the name.
Interesting.
So there's a lot of connections to that part of the world.
Excellent.
Might have
Thank you very much. That's a great.
You showed us, among other things, the hairy hand.
Yes.
It's interesting to note that Dracula's hands, his palms, were also covered in hair.
Yes. There's also a sign of werewolves. Werewolves are known to have hairy palms. And in The Company of Wolves, that wonderful film based on Angela Carter's story, it's used to great effect.
Well,
And they wear their hairs on the inside.
Are they supposed to have a forefinger longer than the middle finger? Does that show in that picture?
Oh, that's a good one. I don't know.
So it gives you a minute.
Yes.
So I have a quick comment on the issue of the castles. I actually come from Romania.
Excellent. Thank you. Welcome.
It was not of my own choosing, so
That's all right. Somebody has to go from
I
there.
actually come from quite close to the castle Bran, and the thing is, Bram Stoker didn't actually base the castle on
No,
the
he
castle
based the story of Dracula. He didn't know any of those castles.
Yeah.
That's later on, people in Romania said, oh, this must have been this and this must have been that. And then there's a third one called Poenari Castle,
Which
that is not
belonged
with,
to
which is
Vlad
not within the Carpathians, but it's more near the southern border with Bulgaria. And, but it's completely in ruins, and there's nothing much to see apart from some fanciful sketches that I've seen on the internet about it.
Yeah, but that's because actually Bram Stoker's own notes, he mentioned so he was in Romania, but what really impressed him or what gave him the ideas of where to make Dracula's castle was a lonely mountaintop also in the Carpathians, but further northeast in Moldavia. And so it appears he wasn't really aware of these castles or of their maybe historical links to Vlad Țepeș. So I'm not entirely sure if there can really be comparisons drawn between these medieval castles in Romania and perhaps what Tolkien might
If Tolkien did a bit of research on the subject, he would have gone with what some people
possible,
said,
yeah.
which might not have nothing to do with the actual author of Bram Stoker,
Yeah.
but more like what people said locally.
Because, or what I mean is because these castles were quite strongly promoted later on by the communists who realized this is a pretty good source of revenue.
Yes.
So the thing is, I don't know if it was already that well known at the time or if it just came up in the 70s or 80s. I'm not really sure if in Tolkien's lifetime it was already kind of something promoted and linked to Dracula.
One last.
But the similarities, the architectural similarities are interesting. That's all I go for, really,
Yeah.
basically. Yep.
Corvinus, there's also Matthias Corvinus, who's king of Hungary in that case, but in that case Corvinus is the raven, not the crow. So I was wondering, because you've got Bram, Welsh raven, Corvinus, I mean, there's mixed with Welsh.
Corvids is a whole family of birds anyway, so a raven falls within the family of corvids.
Is there just maybe for the gentleman from Romania, is there some link with Matthias Corvinus?
So yeah, Matthias Corvinus was allied with Vlad Țepeș, who is the historical base of Dracula, but this was apparently also not something known by Stoker, but Corvinus is actually, so that means raven, so in Romanian it's called, and Corvinus, so it would be like Matthias the raven.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for your contribution.